Section 23, Earning a Commission. Introduction. When has the broker actually earned the commission? In the previous section, we discussed commissions in the contract and how compensation is negotiated and documented in today's real estate environment. We learned that agency and compensation are closely connected and that proper documentation protects both the client and the broker. Now we take the next step and answer a question that every real estate professional eventually hears. When exactly is a commission earned? Many consumers believe a broker only earns a commission when a transaction closes. Some agents believe they earn a commission the moment a contract is signed. Others assume compensation is automatic simply because they introduce the parties. The reality is that the answer depends on the language of the agreement. Understanding when a commission is earned is one of the most important concepts in agency law, because commission disputes often arise when buyers, sellers, landlords, tenants, and brokers have different expectations regarding compensation. The listing agreement is an employment contract. A listing agreement is more than a marketing authorization. It is an employment agreement between the owner and the broker. The agreement establishes the broker's duties, the owner's responsibilities, the duration of the relationship, and the circumstances under which compensation becomes due. Many disputes occur because sellers focus on the marketing portion of the agreement, but never fully understand the compensation provisions. The best agents review these provisions carefully at the listing appointment, rather than waiting until a dispute arises later. Two common ways a commission is earned. Historically, real estate commissions have been earned in one of two ways. The first method occurs when the broker procures a buyer who is ready, willing, and able to purchase the property under terms acceptable to the seller. Under this approach, the broker may earn compensation even if the transaction never closes because the broker successfully performed the task they were hired to perform. The second method is based upon the successful completion of the transaction. Under this approach, the commission is earned only when a purchase contract is signed and the transaction successfully closes escrow. Today, most residential listing agreements are structured around the closing of the transaction. But agents should always read the specific language of the agreement because the exact terms control the outcome. Real-world example. The seller changes their mind. Imagine a broker spends 3 months marketing a property. The broker finds a qualified buyer. The buyer submits a full-price offer. The buyer is pre-approved, financially capable, and ready to close. At the last moment, the seller decides not to move and refuses to proceed with the transaction. Many sellers are surprised to learn that the broker may still have earned compensation, depending on the terms of the listing agreement. The reason is simple. The broker performed the job they were hired to perform by producing a ready, willing, and able buyer. The seller's decision not to proceed does not necessarily eliminate the broker's right to compensation. This is why understanding the listing agreement is so important. The exclusive right to sell listing, Arizona's residential listing contract, exclusive right to sell, is designed to protect the broker's efforts during the listing period. One of the biggest misconceptions among sellers is that they can avoid paying commission by finding their own buyer. In an exclusive right to sell listing, that is generally not the case. The listing agreement typically provides that compensation may be earned if the property sells during the listing period, regardless of who actually finds the buyer. Whether the buyer comes from the broker's marketing efforts, another broker, a friend, a family member, or even the seller's own social media post, the listing agreement may still require payment of compensation. The friend of the seller scenario. A common example occurs when a seller calls the broker and says, "Good news, I found my own buyer, so I don't think I owe a commission." The seller may genuinely believe this. However, under an exclusive right to sell agreement, the broker was hired to market the property and remove the burden of finding a buyer from the seller. The compensation agreement usually protects the broker regardless of who ultimately produces the buyer. This is why agents should explain listing agreements carefully before obtaining signatures. What happens if the listing is canceled? Another common question involves canceled or withdrawn listings. Imagine a broker invests money in photography, marketing, signs, advertising, open houses, and countless hours of work. A week later, the seller decides to withdraw the property from the market. Can the broker still be entitled to compensation? Depending on the terms of the listing agreement, the answer may be yes. Many listing agreements contain provisions addressing withdrawals, cancellations, or situations where the owner prevents the broker from completing the job they were hired to perform. This protects brokers from investing substantial resources only to have the property removed from the market without consequence. The protection period. One of the most misunderstood sections of a listing agreement is the protection period after expiration. Suppose a broker spends 6 months marketing a property. A buyer views the home, negotiates with the seller, and expresses interest, but does not immediately purchase. The listing expires. 2 weeks later, the seller and buyer reconnect and complete the transaction without involving the broker. Should the broker be compensated? The answer may be yes. Many listing agreements contain a protection period stating that if the property is sold to someone who viewed, negotiated on, or became aware of the property during the listing period, compensation may still be due if the transaction occurs within a specified period after expiration. The purpose is to prevent parties from waiting until the listing expires to avoid paying compensation. Rental listings have similar protections. These concepts are not limited to sales transactions. Many rental listing agreements contain provisions protecting the broker if the tenant renews, extends, or later purchases the property. For example, a broker may lease a property to a tenant. 2 years later, that tenant decides to purchase the property directly from the owner. Depending on the terms of the agreement, the broker may still have compensation rights because the tenant originated through the broker's efforts. Compensation disputes between brokers. Occasionally, disputes arise between brokers regarding who should receive compensation. When this occurs, the seller should not become involved in resolving the disagreement. The seller's obligation is to pay the compensation required by the agreement. The brokers can then resolve any disputes through arbitration, mediation, or realtor dispute resolution procedures. This prevents sellers from becoming caught in disputes that do not involve them. The big lesson. The most important thing agents can remember is that commissions are earned according to the terms of the agreement. Every listing agreement should be reviewed carefully. Every compensation discussion should be documented. Every seller should understand when compensation becomes due. The best way to avoid commission disputes is not through litigation or arbitration. It is through clear communication at the beginning of the relationship. When sellers understand the agreement and brokers clearly explain their compensation rights, misunderstandings become far less likely. As we have learned throughout this course, agency and compensation go hand in hand. Understanding both is essential to protecting your clients, your brokerage, and your business. Online discussion questions. Question 1. Why is it important to explain commission provisions during the listing appointment? Answer. Because many sellers do not fully understand when compensation is earned. Discussing the provisions early helps prevent misunderstandings and disputes later. Question 2. Why might a broker still be entitled to compensation if a listing expires? Answer. Many listing agreements contain protection periods that preserve the broker's compensation rights if a buyer introduced during the listing period later purchases the property. Question 3. Why should sellers not become involved in commission disputes between brokers? Answer. The seller's obligation is to follow the listing agreement. Broker compensation disputes are generally resolved separately through arbitration, mediation, or other dispute resolution procedures.